Hey class, we're going to study human proportions in this video. You can use the image in the exercises to help you with this, and I'll kind of walk through it here and how I would go about it. So first thing we can do is we essentially create the medial line, which is the center of the body, and we can make that as tall and long as we want. And then I usually cap it off with a little lines at the end here too. This sets up the center of the body. Human proportions are important because it helps us understand the ratios in the human body and the relationships that then help us build accurate figures. So this went all the way back to the Greeks, as you learned about when you studied Polykleitos, spear bearer, in the earlier pages. Once we have our medial line, our center line with the top and bottom marked off, what we can do is we start to just break this up in half. So I just kind of need to figure out where the halfway mark is. I can do this by using my pencil, and I can start at the top and then hold it to where I think approximately the middle is, and then I can measure that down and see if I'm accurate. And I can tell I am not quite there. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a light mark here to mark it, and then I'll put my pencil at the top, put my hand where I think the middle is, and then I can adjust. And I think that's pretty close. I think what I'm just going to do is just extend it down a little bit. So that can be another way to do it, right? Just making a mark, doubling it here. And then I'll go ahead and erase my extra mark here. So now I have this exactly in the middle. Now what I can do is I'm going to split this up into halves as well, so then I'll have quarters. So once again, I can kind of eyeball this a little bit here, and then I can confirm it. Or you can just use your ruler, which is pretty handy as well. So I'm pretty close to it, not perfect. So I think what I need to do is make this just a hair shorter here. And now I'm looking pretty good. So now I have that in half. Now I just do the same thing approximately here. Hey, that looks pretty good. So now I have it in quarters, and then I just do it one more time. Split these up into these four lines into halves, and now I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces, which will then correlate with the different parts of my body. Now, we also want to take this dimension here. This is ultimately our head height, right? That's the dimension, that's the size of our head, right? And now we have 8 heads, which makes this 8 heads tall. And now, no figure in real life is really 8 heads tall. Most human beings are between 6.5 to 7.5 heads tall. Occasionally someone's an 8, but 8 heads tall is really like, idealized or, superhero type figure size. But the 8 heads tall does make it easier to do this because it's an even number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the head height and I'm going to turn it sideways here. And I'm going to make a mark there. And then get the same dimension here and put it on this side. So I'm about here. And then that is going to enable me to have these 2 rectangles going all along the side and the top and the bottom. And I really ought to be using my ruler for this. So let me go ahead and just use my ruler. probably would have went a lot faster if I just used my ruler in the beginning. So always just do, do as I say, not as I do. Here we go. And then I can go ahead and continue to block this up into squares. And now I have my nice little grid here. And what's important about this little grid that we've created is it helps us build some relate ratios. So we'll see them build along the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by putting our head in this first area. And the head's a bit oval. It's not round. It's oval shape. But it should be, the width of it should be similar to one of these squares. Maybe a little bit smaller, but it should be pretty from, like ear to ear. It should be about the width of one of these squares. And then once we have our head in here, we can kind of put a little straight line here just to mark our neck. But what we want to come down is a little bit above halfway into the next block. We want to put this little V. That is called our sternal notch. That's where your sternum meets. You can put your finger on your body and feel that little V notch there. And what that's going to do is that's going to then extend out to the shoulders, to the edge of the square. And then that's going to kind of be towards where your shoulders begin. Okay? And then we have our, I made the chin a little too low on here, so I'm going to raise that back up. And then we will have our sort of neck. And we're just going to start by mapping this out as basic volumes first before we start adding any detail. So I put the little angles here for the sort of arcing bit of the shoulders. And then what we have is our shoulder joints or shoulder bones kind of act like our little circles here, right? So we can mark those in as circles. And then we'll come back to those later. Now, if we come down to the next line, typically in males, we have our nipples here at this zone. And we get we start to get the torso coming down here into the following line, which is where our belly button is, right? So it's kind of like the bottom of the rib cage is right here as well. And then we have a bit of a gap. The next line down here is sort of the bottom of the pelvis bone, the pelvic bone. So we actually have our sort of our torso in this, like our abdomen kind of in this zone, our abdominal muscles, right? In this zone here. And then our hip, our pelvis is here too. Kind of like sort of shaped, like that roughly. And then our leg bones line up with these next lines. So that's kind of like our big, what we call our sternal, our large leg bone, like that large hip bone that's back in here. And you can kind of feel where that big leg bone sticks out, the big dinosaur bones kind of our leg kind of sticks out here. And that aligns with the bottom of our pelvic floor as well. And then from here, our legs kind of point inward, our big leg femur bones kind of point inward a little bit. And they skip 2 lines here and go to our knees. And you can put the knees in there as just some smaller circles. And then the rest of our legs sort of drop down to the bottom. And then that would sort of be our ankles here at the next line. And then our feet, which at first I just put in as some basic triangles here. So this is the middle of the body, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is right here at the middle of the body. Now let's go ahead and get our arms marked in. So we have our shoulders here from earlier. The top of the arm bone, the upper arm bone, goes down here to this third line, or I guess 1, 2, 3 here, and it aligns with our belly button or our navel, and that's where our elbows are located. And then if you go down to the next line, is kind of where our wrist begins, and then the hand is actually about as long as another head length, and it goes all the way to the middle of our thigh here, or our quadricep. And then we'll do it on the other side as well. And these little alignments really help us, right? That our belly button lines up with our elbows really helps us to understand where things go. Our wrists line up with the bottom of the pelvis. Our hand extends down to about the middle of our thigh. And now we have a relatively proportional looking structure from here. Now we can go ahead and start to add the details. So you can recreate the image that we have here, and we can notice some additional relationships. Notice that the bottom of the deltoid here, or the shoulder muscle, aligns with the nipples, and then the pectoral muscles are a little bit lower than that. And then we have our biceps next here. And then there's a little gap, kind of a little gap where the elbow is roughly. And then we have our forearm muscles that then go down into the wrist. It's very important to always leave a little bit of space for the actual wrist when we are drawing. A lot of people, beginning artists, forget to leave the wrists in there. And then we can add some fingers and the rest of the hand in here as well. And remember, the hand just kind of goes all the way down here. Then we have our, we can kind of move into the torso here, and our sort of abdominal muscles, which kind of create a little bit of like an arch shape here, as then they kind of taper in here as you get into the upper. You can kind of feel this on your hip too, where the top of your big hip bone sticks out here, right at the top of the pelvis before it rises up into sort of the rib cage here, right? So the rib cage kind of comes down here, comes up into the top of where your sort of six pack, if you got one, is, right? And then it rises up underneath the arm here. I'll go ahead and put this other arm in here. Remember, we've got the deltoid, we've got the bicep, we've got the forearm muscles coming down into the wrist. I'm gonna leave the hand as it is. Then, right, in a human, we'd come down into the, or in a male, we'd come down into the groin and the genitals here. You're welcome to draw that if you wish or not. Lost the belly button a little bit there. And then we come down into the legs. So we kind of have the hip bone, then there's kind of a space in here where the between the upper hip bone, and this is like kind of the pelvis area here before we kind of really start to get into the great trochanter here, which is where this leg bone really sticks out here. The great trochanter is what they call it. And that's another good landmark to sort of identify, especially when you're drawing figures in person, if you ever take an in-person figure drawing class. Sort of getting those major areas can be very helpful. And then we get down into the knee. There's a little bit of space in between the knee and the quadriceps or the thigh muscles. And then we kind of drop down into the calf and the ankle here. The calf does go to this next headline typically. So the bottom of the calf aligns here with the 7th line. So that can be another great trick too. And if your proportions are ever off, we can kind of use some strategies. Notice our hand is typically, if you hold your hand up, the palm of your hand to your chin, to the top of your head, the hand is usually about 3/4 of a head height, right? So we're kind of in this zone for a hand. In this image, it looks a little bit like almost full head, but that's because this is a little bit idealized, right? But in a human head, a human hand is about 3/4 of a head. So we can kind of start to use relationships like that to figure out like, hey, where are things at? Why does this feel off? How do I improve my proportions? Again, the calf comes down here to this next line. And then we have the foot, where we have the ankle meeting. And then in a frontal view like this, we have some foreshortening happening here, right? So we'd have the toes coming in here, something like this, right? The ankles kind of stick out a little bit here. We kind of have the arch of the foot. There's usually a little bit of overlap here, the arch of the foot. Then we can have the toes, big toe, and then the other little toes kind of coming out like that. Now, mine look a little bit Frodo Baggins here at the moment, but I could revise that as I go. The head here is the eyes are usually right in the middle of the head, which is helpful. And that usually our ears are in that zone as well. The bottom of the ears align with the bottom of the nose, and then the top of the ears kind of go up towards the sort of eyebrow line here. We have the hairline as well here also. So we can add some, a nice hairdo to our guy here. Then the mouth is kind of down at the sort of the next quarter here of the head. And then we have the chin here coming down to the next line. And so now we have some basic human proportions mapped out here using the 8 head high strategy. And, it's just good to know this information as you're trying to build a figure. But when I'm doing a lot of figure drawing, I ultimately use the gesture strategy, which you all will learn. But I think it's important to have this knowledge in hand because it helps solve some issues when you're on the fly working with your models. All right, folks. Hey, good work and look forward to seeing your results.